Hey guys, so if you're moving to Arizona, Gilbert and Chandler tend to be on the top of a lot of people's lists. But as they dig in deeper, you kind of start to look at, well, what really is the difference between Chandler and Gilbert? Which one's best for me and why? I'm gonna go through in this video a couple of things to help you kind of decide whether focusing your attention on Chandler or on Gilbert is gonna be best for you. Let's get right into it. All right, so a little bit of history real quick about the two. So both Chandler and Gilbert, back in the early 1900s, they were kind of started as farm communities. So there was a small downtown Chandler, downtown Gilbert, lots and lots and lots of square miles of irrigated farmland. And that's the way it was for a very, very long time, very humble. Considering the city of Phoenix, out west, this was considered basically the middle of nowhere, right? Now, fast forward, especially as we get closer into the 90s, population started to explode. Why? Urban sprawl, right? So, Phoenix and Scottsdale and maybe even moving down into Tempe all started getting built out, especially Tempe in the 70s, and then building and, new construction as people continued to move here started growing towards the east into the East Valley, Mesa, and then later Chandler, and now Gilbert really is the last one that in the last recent decades has been getting built out. So that's kind of the flow of how the growth went, just kind of generally speaking. But yeah, they both had very humble farm town beginnings, and so that's kind of a lot of the roots of Chandler and Gilbert. But let's start with Chandler. Chandler is much more of a tech city, really. A lot of people are surprised by this, but back in the late 70s, mostly the 80s, Intel, the semiconductor computer chip manufacturing company, they decided to pick Chandler as their location for their fab, which turned out to be at that time, I think, the largest manufacturing plant, at least for Intel in the world, based on what I was looking at. So back when that was built in the 80s, every other vendor and company that wanted to, supply them and support them and do things, they started building all around them. Fast forward through to today, Chandler is a very tech savvy company. You've got lots of high-end engineering companies. You've got Northrop Grumman. The Price Corridor, I've got another video that kind of gives a tour of Chandler, but the Price Corridor is an area where there's over 900 different companies that specialize in different types of, advanced business services and functions, engineering, high-tech manufacturing, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a piece of Chandler that Gilbert doesn't necessarily have, especially not in that same way. All right, so one thing about Chandler and Gilbert, they both started from humble beginnings. They were both farm towns in the early 1900s, and then they started to grow. And then it really started to explode from the early 90s, late 80s, moving forward. In fact, today, 2023, both Chandler and Gilbert are about the same size population-wise, both sitting just shy of 300,000 people. So probably not very much longer till they're both, at or above those numbers. But let's get into a little bit of what makes them unique and different and what obviously makes them the same. All right, so both Chandler and Gilbert have definite historic downtowns, and they were just small, areas for the longest of times until, recent decades, especially in the last 10 years where they both have been revitalized and rebuilt. So what's the same about them? Well, they're both very family friendly. They're both fun to go to. They're both somewhat small. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things going on, but they're not like, it's not as big as, let's say, Old Town Scottsdale, but that's kind of where the sameness ends. And the difference is, once you go over to Chandler, you're going to see a lot more mom and pop restaurants, bars, boutique shops, things like that. And most all of them are going to be independently owned or very small, type company environments. Whereas if we go over and check out Gilbert's downtown, Gilbert's got all of the high-end, large corporate restaurants and everything. I'm not talking fast food. I mean, we're talking really nice places like Culinary Dropout. You got Lolo's Chicken, you've got Zen Burger, you've got Dirk's Bentley Whiskey Row, lots of high-end development right along that section of Gilbert Road in the downtown Gilbert area, which they also call the Heritage District. That's where you'll see the big water tower that everybody, puts on magazine covers and things like that. So parking garages are in both locations, so they're both easy to park at, get into, free parking in both cities. Really, it's just the kind of the vibe is a slight difference. Downtown Gilbert, yeah, you're just gonna have more bigger restaurants, bigger names, especially at night driving through. Downtown Gilbert's got a lot of the high-end signs and really cool looking stuff, whereas downtown Chandler, still a little bit older, kind of more old-timey, lots of cool stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit of a different vibe, but there is, a lot of similarities as well, which is where people kind of get confused or not sure, okay, what's the difference between the two? So the reality is people who live in the Chandler-Gilbert area frequently visit both downtowns. They don't really choose between the two. They have access to both, so why not? All right, so let's talk about job opportunities and kind of the economy in general between Chandler and Gilbert. So Chandler is very much a tech-oriented, forward-thinking, tech-savvy city, and that really came about back in the late 70s when it was being talked about, and really through the 80s when Intel Corporation, they're one of the largest semiconductor computer chip manufacturing companies in the world. They're probably in your phone or in your laptop. Everyone's heard of Intel. Well, back in the 80s is when they decided to put Chandler, Arizona as their main location here in Arizona for a massive manufacturing plant. Of course, when you plop down billions of dollars for a plant like that, you have all these other companies that sprout up around it that sell them services and support them and otherwise create an ecosystem of high-tech manufacturing. Fast forward through to today, you have the Price Corridor, which is on the south end is the Intel campus, and then following through that on north, you've got data centers and high-tech engineering firms and high-tech business services, advanced business services. Toyota Financial Services, when it comes to mind right away, they've got a large building. You've got the Wells Fargo Center where they do tons of advanced banking. I'm not talking about branch offices or things like that. Price Corridor, you want to check out another video of ours for the tour of that area, but there's about more than 900 companies consolidated in that area of, generally high-tech, types of employers and jobs in that area. And so that's a very strong, stalwart kind of thing for Chandler specifically that isn't really attributable to Gilbert. Now that said, a lot of people who work in that area commute to Gilbert, no doubt, but that probably adds, 15, 20 minutes depending on where you're going to live in Gilbert to drive to work. Whereas a lot of folks that work in the high-tech area, especially South Chandler, you're going to want to look at the Ocotillo neighborhoods, just South Chandler in general, lots of beautiful, newer neighborhoods in that area. But that kind of gives you an idea of what kind of drives Chandler and where the kind of, area is that supports all of that, high-tech infrastructure and jobs and companies that are here. Contrast that with Gilbert. So Gilbert obviously does have some employers. They've got some big names. I mean, GoDaddy, which is a huge software web company, you can buy your domain name through them, especially in the 2000s, early 2000s, they had a really awesome commercials on TV. But GoDaddy, of course, you've got Isogenics, which is a really large international supplement company. They've got a huge, beautiful office on the 202 freeway where they manage all of their operations and things that are going on with them. And you've got, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other companies, but they're kind of spread out in different things. You got, Deloitte, they have a really nice office in Gilbert. They're one of the big four accounting and audit firms, of course. And there's definitely a presence of more high-tech and advanced business services also in Gilbert. It's just not all consolidated in one heavy location. Generally speaking, when it comes to the economy and jobs, there's not as much of the high-end job market in Gilbert. There's lots and lots of retail and other, entertainment and things like that going on. I think that, the other big thing that people kind of overlook because you don't see it driving around, a lot of people who live in Gilbert work from home. They have a home office where they, take care of whatever it is that they do. Maybe they're a software programmer. I know one guy in particular, he's been, building for the last 20 years, him and his business partner. He does all the software. His business partner does the sales out in New York. And they're a two-man team essentially. And he works from home here in Gilbert, Arizona for the last 20 years, taking care of software. I think there's a lot more of that going on than people realize. A lot of people from California have moved here in recent years, especially during the pandemic, and decided they want to live in a nice large home, big yard, hanging out at their home, hanging out at the pool, good strong internet. So you're going to see a lot more of those kinds of environments in Gilbert as far as quote unquote local jobs, lots of work from home people going on in Gilbert. All right, so talking a little bit about the differences of shopping. So yeah, it's kind of nice to go and get some retail therapy every once in a while. Maybe you're the kind of person that just wants to go and get what you need and go, get back. That's totally cool. And you're going to find everything you're looking for locally. One thing you want to check out. So in Chandler, we have Chandler Fashion Center or Chandler Fashion Square Mall, however you want to call it. Anyway, it's on the west end of Chandler and it is the second busiest indoor mall in Arizona. I think second only to the one in Scottsdale, but beautiful. I mean, it's well maintained. They have great tenants. One of the things you can always look for in a community. If you want to go to their local mall, think about it like this. The local mall is where people go to spend their disposable income. If it's run down, lots of vacancies, things are just kind of not looking great, that can tell you a little bit about what's going on in the community as a whole. Well, if you go to Chandler, you're going to see a brand new Scheels opening very soon. If not, by the time you're watching this, already open. Monstrous outdoor store, a Ferris wheel inside, fish tanks. It's more of an experience to go to, so you're going to want to check that out if you haven't already done so. You got other major tenants and anchors. It's a very high-end, well-kept shopping center, which is super family friendly. And I will point out, in the summertime when you have the extreme heat, if you're going to be living here year-round, make sure you check out the Chandler Fashion Mall so you can go walk around and enjoy the AC and just kind of, get out of the house. Because sometimes, especially in the afternoons before dark, it's pretty much really one of the main options that you're going to have for being indoors in a bigger space, and don't discount that. Now, switching over to Gilbert, of course, you've got downtown Gilbert, with a couple of boutiques and shops. Downtown Gilbert is mostly going to be like entertainment, going out to eat, drinks, things like that. As far as shopping, you've got Santan Village, which is a section of Gilbert. I'd say it's right in the center geographically of the town of Gilbert, where you're going to have Topgolf and Main Event, and you're going to have the major outdoor shopping center where you have major anchors like Macy's and Dillard's and dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller shops and stores, all very, very beautiful and nice. I will say it's a little bit quieter there in the summer months than the one in Chandler because it's outdoors, but during the winter months when the weather here is absolutely gorgeous, you're going to love the holiday events. They close off some of the streets, and they've got street fairs, I should say, and all the different vendors that with the pop-up tents selling little cool things. One quick example is there's a local guy here in Gilbert who's got a 3D printer, and he laser prints, or a laser printer, and he cuts out these little deals on wood which you can pop out and make a little slingshot thrower, which is like $5. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm still playing with it. It's a stupid toy on my desk. But those kinds of trinkets and fun things that you'll find just as something fun to do with the family or to go out and check it out. But shopping wise, as far as the two core shopping areas, yeah, that's the kind of what you're going to get. Gilbert's going to have a beautiful, primarily outdoor shopping experience. Chandler's going to have a big indoor, kind of more traditional mall, but it's not traditional in the sense that it's going downhill or not looking good like a lot of malls around America. Chandler's mall is looking very, very good. Same with Gilbert, of course. All right, so geographically, well, if you're looking at the map, you've got, Chandler and Gilbert right next to each other. They're underneath the 60 freeway and underneath Mesa. So the city of Mesa covers the north and comes down on the eastern edge. And then underneath Mesa, you've got a big chunk, which is the town of Gilbert, the city of Chandler. And so that's kind of how it's laid out. Now, where you choose to live really depends on your commute. Like if you're going to be working from home, well, obviously that opens up some options. We can talk about that. But if you're going to be commuting to say Scottsdale or downtown Phoenix or, another area, where you live in Chandler or Gilbert will make an immense difference in how long it takes you to get to work. We have multiple freeways, of course, going through the area. Like I mentioned just now, we have the 60 freeway on the north, you have the 202 loop, which goes along the south, and then you have the 101 freeway, which comes down on basically the western part of Chandler. And so if you're going to be living out further east in Gilbert, where you're going to have, slightly newer homes, not saying that there aren't brand new homes in Chandler, of course there are, but as development started to spread eastward, Gilbert on average is going to have newer homes than Chandler, but with that, it's going to come a little bit longer commute, especially if you're going to be along the 202 or up north on the 60. The older homes of Gilbert are going to be further north, especially closer to the 60 freeway. The newer stuff with the bigger, big yards, big backyards, pools, things like that, generally speaking, you're going to be further south. Think, Power Ranch or Seville. Those are some neighborhoods that you might have heard of if you're already kind of doing some research. That's going to be more further south. And so you're going to have to take the arterial roads to head north, basically to the 202 loop to jump on that freeway, or, all the way through to get to the 101 to get connected to, basically the rest of the freeway system in the region, connecting you up to the, Phoenix Gateway Airport. And that's another point too. If you are somebody who commutes on an airline, airlines on a regular basis, right in, well, I should say next to Gilbert is technically the city of Mesa, but you have the Mesa Gateway Airport, which has some of the budget airlines like Allegiant Air. That's going to be basically right next to Gilbert. We're talking less than 10 minutes for most of the people. Otherwise, if you're driving out to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, the primary, commercial airport of the Phoenix Metro, you're talking 30, 35 minutes. It kind of depends on, where you're at in Gilbert. If you're in the far south end of Gilbert, basically pushing down into Queen Creek, like Power Ranch area, probably about 40 minutes realistically to get out to the airport. So if that's important to you, you can kind of see that on the map, especially if you're using Google Maps to kind of look around and see what's going on. Or look, better yet, if you are kind of exploring and wanting to buy a home here in Chandler or Gilbert, just give us a call, shoot us a quick email, send us a text. Our team would love to help you navigate the nuances of Chandler versus Gilbert and what is best for you, your family, your situation, what kind of lifestyle you're looking for, all the different variables that can go into your situation and how to, best position yourself to buy right. There's a lot of, like you can imagine, in any area, there are nuances to the different things. Since our team is here, we're local, we live here, we know the neighborhoods inside and out, make sure you give us a call. But moving on to the next part about housing and neighborhoods. So one of the things about different housing and neighborhoods, it kind of depends on what you're looking for and what your budget is looking like. Just give you a quick example. Me personally, I live in a home that was built in the late 90s. So for this area, it's, an older home. But, there are older homes that have been renovated and updated and had things done to them. And there are some benefits to the older homes. The main ones are where they were built. Obviously, as urban sprawl and development continues to grow, south and east, throughout the Phoenix Valley, older homes typically are located, in closer proximity to the major freeways, which means if you are a commuter, you might kind of want to consider those areas and maybe, have that option. A lot of times older homes, have much larger lot sizes. Back when land was cheaper in recent decades, the recent decade especially, like any new construction, you're talking much, much smaller lot sizes because they have to pack in more homes in order to make the development profitable. Whereas the home I live in back in the 90s, apparently the land wasn't as expensive. They could afford to sell homes to people at that point in time with larger lot sizes. That's the route I took. Made sense to me and my family, and we're definitely, sitting in a pretty good situation because of it. It might not be for everybody. Maybe you want that brand new home with, all the modern amenities and, updated. I mean, that's awesome, and you can definitely have that, and we know those neighborhoods inside and out, and they're really not that far off the freeway, but you are going to drive a little bit further to get to most of those places. So education and schools in general. So of course we have the Chandler Public Schools, the Gilbert Public Schools. They both offer, busing. They're the more like quote unquote traditional school districts. It's what people from other parts of the country are mostly used to. Another thing that we have here in the Chandler Gilbert area are a lot of charter schools. So the charter school program are basically independent, let's call them privately owned schools that are paid for with public money. So basically if you want your children to go to one of these types of schools, you have to apply. They have to be accepted, but then tax revenue that would have normally gone to a public school gets redirected to the charter school. I might be oversimplifying it, but that's basically the gist of it on how charter schools work. Definitely there's some politics involved behind the scenes of whether they are a good thing or a bad thing. I know a lot of parents definitely really like them. I'm not gonna, weigh in on whether it's good or bad, but it's definitely an option that's different and unique that a lot of families moving to Chandler and Gilbert just aren't aware of, because typically for most people, you either send your kids to the public schools or private schools. And in this area, there are private schools. They're typically, you can Google it and look online, but most of the private schools are religious based. And so if you are coming from a particular faith and you want your children to be involved in that, you'll definitely want to research which private schools might be best for your family in that situation. But for the majority of the people in the area, public schools are great. The charter schools are a different system that have, really beautiful facilities. There's a lot of good things. Most of them, all of them maybe, don't offer school buses. So that's a kind of a difficulty for a lot of families that maybe have two parents who work. They can't pick up or drop off and pick up their kids from charter schools, so they need to, use the public school system. Yeah, you definitely want to do some research on that. We'd be happy to help you with that, of course. We've had lots of clients and families that we've assisted with buying homes in the area and kind of helping navigate the nuances of, their kids in that situation. There are, even within the public school systems, there's, certain schools that specialize in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math kind of curriculum and programs. So happy to help weigh in on some of that and kind of direct what you're looking for. If choosing an area is going to be, if you're moving to the area, we'd be happy to help you kind of like navigate and narrow that down based on these different factors that or might be important to you, right? So big picture, Chandler and Gilbert in a lot of ways are very, very similar. They had, very similar beginnings, very similar development plans and paths. The biggest difference, however, is that Chandler on average is going to have some older neighborhoods and some older homes. As you go further south in Chandler is where you're going to find all the newer homes, which are kind of centered around the high-tech price corridor employment hub area. Gilbert, on the other hand, is a little bit newer on average because it started getting developed and built as Chandler started getting more, finished, if you will. And so you're going to have a lot more newer homes out that direction. Of course, you have the 202 loop, which is the main freeway on the, that cuts through the heart and the south end of, the heart of Gilbert and Chandler. And, south of the 202 is going to be pretty much all new stuff in the last 15, for sure, 20 years, more or less. And so that kind of gives you an idea of where that kind of development is. But there are, like I said, there are nuances. And I think the major ones that matter to most people is, where should I live based on the commute that I'm going to have? Where should I live based on the kinds of schools I'm looking for my kids? And where should I live based on what kinds of things I like to do for fun? Now, in that situation, for families in general, I'm going to tell you, Chandler is a very, very family-friendly area, lots of family neighborhoods. But if you're a single young professional or married, whatever, basically with no kids, most people I talk to are going to find Chandler to be more kind of their vibe. Whereas if you're like family and you have, you want the big home where the kids can play and bicycle in the streets, again, there are neighborhoods like that in Chandler, absolutely. But if we're going to just kind of blanket bomb, a generalization, Gilbert's going to be the area that you want to focus your attention on for that. Yeah. So, but again, we won't know how to tell you exactly where you want to look unless you actually reach out and give us a call. Shoot us that quick email, text message, connect with us so we can start that conversation with you and kind of help you lead and guide you to where, you might best be happy and, and get that kind of information that, might be really hard or difficult, or just, looking on a computer screen and researching just doesn't always kind of go well together. So again, guys, I appreciate you watching. If you are thinking about moving or relocating to the Phoenix area, subscribe. Click the subscribe button and tap the bell. That way you'll get notified. This channel is want to know everything about what it's like to work, eat, sleep, live, and play here in the Chandler, Gilbert, and Greater Phoenix area. This is the channel for you. Subscribe, tap the bell, and until the next video, guys, catch you on the next one.